Hello, listeners! Welcome to Stars of the Golden Age, a show that highlights the lives of legends from film, music, and the birth of television during Hollywood's golden age and the few years surrounding it. I am your host, Erin Carlson. Today, we will be discussing Tyrone Power. I had a request to cover him through a review on Apple Podcasts from the screen name Movie Degree. So, Movie Degree, I moved Mr. Power to the top of the list just for you. Thank you so much for your positive review and your recommendation. Before I begin, I want to announce that next week you can expect a very special episode of Stars of the Golden Age. Want to know more? Too bad, you'll have to wait. Make sure to tune in next Tuesday to check it out. One more thing, and I promise I will get into our story. I want to recommend another podcast that I've been really loving for a while. And since you all enjoy learning about Hollywood, I think you might also like this podcast. It is called Horrorwood: True Crime in Tinseltown. Each week, hosts Kate and Kevin bring a new and deeply researched episode about the darker side of Tinseltown. Whether it's an unsolved murder mystery, a haunted theater, or a tragedy that occurred on a film set, Horrorwood explores topics dating from the birth of the movie industry to present day. The hosts are good friends and really fun to listen to, and they make you feel like you're right there in the room with them. Guys, I'm kind of picky about who I fill my ears with, and those two keep me wanting more with every episode. You can find Horrorwood on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts. Please check them out. Now, on to our star. Tyrone Edmund Power was born on May 5, 1914, in Cincinnati, Ohio. His parents were Frederick Tyrone Edmund Power and Helen, or Paisha as she went by. Tyrone was born into entertainment royalty. His great-grandfather, Tyrone Power I, was an Irish immigrant who brought to the New World with him great comedic performances. His grandfather, Harold Littledale Power, was a concert pianist. And his father, Frederick Tyrone Power II, was a very well-received Shakespearean actor who traveled the United States performing on stage. Traveling by his side was his wife Paisha, Tyrone's mother, who was an actress and drama coach. The hugely powerful and rapidly growing silent film industry brought the family to Hollywood in 1916. Another reason for the move was that little Tyrone was often sick, and the family's doctor suggested the California climate would be really good for the little boy's health. Tyrone's little sister Anne joined the family in 1917 when he was 3 years old. Tyrone Sr. was really enjoying his work in films. More so, he was loving the extramarital affairs that he was having with his beautiful co-stars. He wasn't a very faithful husband or a very present father. Tyrone Sr. and Paisha starred in just one movie together, the silent film called The Planter in 1917. I cross-checked this film on IMDB, and this is kind of hilarious. Paisha's name, as far as IMDB is concerned, is Mrs. Tyrone Power. That's so 1917. And then Tyrone Sr. was offered a part in a Broadway play, so he took off back to New York, and he left his wife and 2 young children in California. From this point on, he was a mostly absent figure in his children's lives. Tyrone Sr. and Paisha divorced in 1920. Paisha was now on her own and had to find a way to support herself and her 2 children. She took on work as an actress in local stage productions. She also began training Tyrone and his little sister Anne for their future in show business, with regular voice and diction lessons from a very young age. Tyrone Power made his stage debut at the age of 7 when he appeared with his mother in a play called La Golondrina, and he was described by one critic as a miniature hit. Paisha was determined to bring her children into a life of stardom. Paisha and her children moved back to Cincinnati in 1923, where she became a drama and vocal coach at the Schuster Martin School of Drama. Ty was 9 years old at the time of their move. A friend of Tyrone's, J. Watson Webb Jr., said Ty's mother gave him and his younger sister this advice as they were going through the transition and new beginning of their life. She said this: "You have to remember to bend like a tree because life is difficult and there are a lot of storms in it. There will be heavy winds, and if you don't bend, you will break. So bend." I think that is really insightful advice. When Ty was 16, he got a job at the Orpheum Theater in Cincinnati. He was an usher. He loved this access to great productions on the Orpheum stage. He also worked as a soda jerk at a local drugstore. Although Ty's father wasn't very present in his life, he was still impressed by his career as an actor and inspired to follow in his footsteps. He acted in plays during high school, being the lead in at least one, and had aspirations of being an actor. He loved being on stage. Ty graduated high school in 1931. In the yearbook, he was coined, quote, "the logical successor to John Barrymore," end quote. So he must have been putting forth some pretty impressive work in those high school plays. Ty spent the summer after graduation with his father. The two were virtually strangers, and Ty wanted to get to know his father and gain from him some guidance on being a successful actor. They spent the summer camping in the rugged woods of Quebec, where Tyrone Sr. now lived, and this became a significant bonding experience for father and son. The two traveled to Chicago together at the end of that summer because Tyrone Sr. was due to perform in The Merchant of Venice at the Chicago Civic Auditorium. He was able to get his son a small part, and Ty played in 6 performances with his father. It was a really special experience for both of them, and it would be the only time they would ever grace the same stage together. Ty would return to visit his father at Christmas time later that year, this time in Hollywood, where Tyrone Sr. was filming the movie The Miracle Man, in which he had a starring role. Tyrone Sr. felt a little off during most of the filming so far, but he kept on working. On the evening of December 23rd, after a long day of filming, 62-year-old Tyrone Sr. suffered a massive heart attack in his hotel room. He died in his son's arms. This was an incredibly traumatic experience for 17-year-old Tyrone Power. He now had a drive stronger than ever to succeed as a great actor. He needed to become a great actor in his father's memory. He decided to stay in California and make his way onto the silver screen. But it wouldn't be as easy as he thought. Work in films just wasn't coming easy. He worked in a couple of films as an extra, but his recognizable name and striking good looks weren't coming in as handy as he expected. So he acted in a few local community theater productions, and he also worked as a chauffeur for a friend of his late father. After realizing his dreams of stardom weren't happening automatically in California, Tyrone decided to relocate to New York City and build a reputation as a stage actor, and then return and try again in Hollywood. Now amongst the glimmery lights of Broadway, his luck was about to turn around. That happened when he met and auditioned for the hugely popular stage actress and impresario, Katharine Cornell, soon after his arrival in New York. She became a mentor to him and is a very important character in the story of the life and career of Tyrone Power. Ty was cast in a few small roles, and then he struck gold in 1935 when he was cast for the part of Benvolio in Romeo and Juliet. While performing the show in Los Angeles, Tyrone Power was spotted by Hollywood talent scouts, and he was offered a 7-year contract with Universal Studios for $200 per week. And since you know I love adjusting old-timey money for inflation, that would be about $4,600 a week today. So a great opportunity for a 20-year-old aspiring actor. But his mentor, Katharine Cornell, told him it wasn't the right time. She thought that he should try a little harder on stage to really dial in his expertise. So he listened to her. A few months down the road, Hollywood talent scouts sat in Ty's audience again. This time in New York, and this time for 20th Century Fox. The studio was working hard to grow to the success of other studios like MGM, and they needed to find stars to build their stock of actors. 8-year-old Shirley Temple was their big moneymaker at this time. They had a top leading lady in Alice Faye, but they needed a leading man. They needed their answer to MGM's Robert Taylor. Ty's screen test went well, and the studio liked what they saw. Tyrone Power was signed under contract with 20th Century Fox in 1936 at the age of 21. He had made it. Ty was in a couple of small roles in a couple of small films before he appeared in the movie that would make people take notice. The movie was Girls' Dormitory, and still just a very small part, but his presence was memorable. Especially to gossip columnist Hedda Hopper. Just the person you want to be memorable to. Well, I guess it depends on what for. When Hedda went to see Girls' Dormitory at the theater, she ended up staying for 2 showings. She couldn't take her eyes off of this new handsome actor who only appeared briefly at the end of the film. She had to know who he was. She later said, after she had come to know Tyrone Power, quote, "He wasn't arrogant, he wasn't full of himself, but I've never seen anyone as handsome as Ty," end quote. Hedda Hopper had a little crush, I think. It was a slow start at 20th Century Fox, and they weren't so sure about keeping Tyrone Power around. But a little determination and assertiveness got him the lead role in the 1936 movie Lloyds of London, and his name and family connections. The director, Henry King, was an old friend of his father's. Connections or not, King knew Ty would be a great star someday with the talent that he saw in him. Landing this role in Lloyds of London was the big break that he needed. The movie was Fox's #1 grossing film that year, and Tyrone Power became an overnight movie star. And he had the fan mail to prove it. Tyrone Power received over 1,000 fan letters every single day after his overnight success. He quickly realized that Catherine Cornell knew what she was talking about when she told him to hold out on Hollywood. After Ty's success with Lloyds of London with 20th Century Fox, he was given a salary of $350 per week and his very own dressing room. That $350 per week would be about $7,900 a week today. He came seemingly out of nowhere, and he was suddenly up there with the likes of Clark Gable and Spencer Tracy. 22-year-old Tyrone Power was doing pretty good. When asked about his overnight success, he would reply, quote, "I was the right person at the right time, and I was lucky to be there," end quote. In 1937, Ty starred opposite actress Sonia Henney in the movie Thin Ice, and the two began a passionate romance. 1937 also brought one of the hugest honors that can be bestowed on an actor. Tyrone Power pressed his hands and feet in the cement outside of Grauman's Chinese Theater. Only about 200 stars have been graced with this honor, and Tyrone Power is one of them. Above his prints, he wrote in the cement, "Following in my father's footsteps," as a tribute to his father. Tyrone became fascinated with flying, and in 1938, he began taking flying lessons. He was very devoted to this new passion and became a licensed pilot. All of the biggest female stars in Hollywood wanted to work with Tyrone Power. In 1938, huge star Norma Shearer pushed to have him star opposite her in Marie Antoinette, which was a huge production at MGM Studios. This would mean Fox would have to loan out Power to MGM. They did, and the movie wasn't the anticipated success it was intended to be. With its failure to showcase their star, Fox vowed to never again loan out their star, Tyrone Power. Also in 1938, back home at 20th Century Fox, Ty appeared in the movie Suez with Loretta Young and a new French beauty named Annabella. Annabella was a seasoned actress from France but new on the Hollywood scene, and sparks flew hot between Tyrone Power and Annabella. The two instantly fell under each other's spell and began a whirlwind romance. There was one problem, though. Annabella was married and had a young daughter. She scurried back to France and secured a divorce. She was going all in with Tyrone Power. But head of Fox Darryl Zanuck did not like his top leading man to be tied down in a monogamous relationship, even if it was one of his own female stars. According to Zanuck, a dashing leading man was much more appealing to audiences if he was an available bachelor. Tyrone Power was Fox's matinee idol, and they wanted him to appear available, so the everyday woman drooling over him in the theater might think she has a chance to be hooked around his arm. Zanuck's strategy to fix this problem was to send Annabella to Europe to work on a multi-picture deal overseas, far away from Tyrone Power. But it's not that easy to break up true love, and Annabella did something that could have very easily ruined her career before it even had a chance to get off the ground. She refused. Annabella was put on suspension for her refusal to do the work that the Fox execs instructed her to do. But her love for Tyrone Power was more important than her career. Tyrone and Annabella were married on April 23, 1939. Shortly after, Tyrone adopted Annabelle's daughter, Annie. Wanting to start their new life together in style, the couple picked out a large, beautiful home in Brentwood, California. But when it was time to pay for the house, Tyrone learned a shocking truth. His business manager, Frank Adams, who was a family friend, one of his father's very best friends, had been stealing from Ty. Tyrone Power, one of the most famous actors in Hollywood, was broke. Tyrone Power didn't like confrontation, and he didn't like stressful situations. So he accepted the situation as it was and did nothing more than fire Frank Adams. But all was not lost. Annabella had been a successful star in France for years before coming to the U.S., so she had money of her own. That big, beautiful house in Brentwood would still be theirs. The new family settled into a neighborhood in Brentwood, California, surrounded by other famous actors of the time. Their neighborhood social life was rich and fun. They were living the dream. Annabella recounted very happy times in their first few years of married life amongst the greatest faces in Hollywood. But the joy and happiness faded after those first few glorious years. Tyrone wanted a child very badly. More specifically, he wanted a son to carry on the great show business legacy of the Tyrone Powers of the past, and they were having a very difficult time conceiving. Besides this setback, Tyrone was also having affairs. He had several flings outside of his marriage, but one stood out as more than just a fling: Judy Garland. Ty and Judy began a full-on relationship, and Judy wanted him to leave Annabella and be with her. Judy Garland was madly in love with Tyrone Power. But he didn't want to leave Annabella, and he didn't necessarily want to lose Judy either. He wanted it all. This love triangle drama would have to be put on hold, though. With the U.S. entry into World War II in December of 1941, Tyrone Power enlisted in the U.S. Marine Corps. Remember, he is a licensed pilot, and he was ready and willing to use his skills as a pilot in serving his country. Darryl Zanuck wasn't ready to let him go, though. He negotiated with the military to defer his leave so he could keep Tyrone Power for just a little bit longer before sending him off to war. Tyrone starred in the war movie Crash Dive in 1942, and the plan was for the movie to encourage other young men into enlisting in the military. The U.S. Navy even set up a recruitment station in the lobby of Grauman's Chinese Theater for the premiere of the movie. Tyrone Power reported for active military duty with the United States Marine Corps on January 1, 1943. He put his ultra-successful career and the relationships with two women who loved him on hold to serve his country. Ty was 30 years old when he returned home from 3 years at war. He had a lot of time to reflect on the situation in his personal life while overseas, and you know what they say about distance and the heart. So when he returned home, he decided his marriage to Annabella was worth saving. He was committed to putting his all into repairing their relationship. Darryl Zanuck was also delighted to have his matinee star home. Tyrone stepped right back in where he left off before his service to the country, and he was as popular as ever. As most serious actors do, Power wanted to diversify his talents and challenge himself as an actor with more complex roles. He advocated for himself to play the lead in the 1947 movie Nightmare Alley. His character was a dark, rough drunk, a far contrast from the Tyrone Power that the world was used to. This portrayal would remain Tyrone Power's proudest work in films. However, the studio execs wanted to maintain Ty's romantic lead reputation, so they barely allowed the movie to be shown in theaters and certainly did not promote it. This was a disappointing moment in Tyrone's career. He was experiencing disappointment in his personal life as well. The same year as Nightmare Alley, Ty and Annabella came to the realization that their marriage could not be repaired. The once great love affair was now over. After the divorce, rumors started spreading about Tyrone's sexuality. It sounds like this simply stemmed from the fact that he spent a lot of time with his male friends after his divorce. According to his friend, Fred Giles, quote, "The men in Tyrone's life never complicated his life, and the women gave him a big headache," end quote. Well, there was one woman who didn't seem to give him a big headache, and that was the stunning Lana Turner. Their relationship wasn't destined for happily ever after, but they had a highly publicized romance for a while at least. There are rumors that the two were even involved while he was still with Annabella. Later in 1947, Tyrone Power announced that he was going to fly his plane around the world, and off he went on his 33,000-mile grand adventure, joined by a co-pilot, flight engineer, navigator, radio operator, Fox publicist, and his secretary. On this grand adventure, Tyrone fell in love. While in Italy on this around-the-world tour, Ty met an actress named Linda Christian. She recalled the story of while she was in his hotel suite in Rome. She said while they were together in his room, the phone rang, and on the other end of the line was Lana Turner. Lana said, "Tell me that you love me," through the phone, and Tyrone looked Linda Christian in her eyes and said into the receiver, "I love you." And that was that, recalled Linda. Well played, Mr. Power. Ty never made it all the way around the world. Love stopped him. He married Linda Christian in Rome in January of 1949. Their wedding was a huge deal in Rome, and all of Rome came out to get a glimpse of it. The crowds were so huge that Linda was an hour late for her own wedding because she couldn't get to the church. Ty's chance to become a biological father came when Linda became pregnant shortly after they were married. Tragically, she experienced 2 second-term miscarriages in the first year and a half of their marriage, a little boy and a little girl. The couple had a healthy baby girl named Romina on October 2nd, 1951. His personal life was on a positive path, but his career seemed to be slowly sliding downhill. Now that he was in his late 30s, he was being cast in second-rate films. He was the aging star. When it was time to renew his contract with 20th Century Fox, he decided to end his relationship with the studio. He wanted to do bigger things with his talent, so he became a free agent in Hollywood after 20 years of being owned by the studio that he jokingly called Penitentiary Fox. His first film outside of his long-standing contract with Fox was Mississippi Gambler, which was a big success for Power. Having the freedom to choose his own roles as a free agent wasn't as exciting as he thought it would be. Tyrone Power made the decision to challenge himself on the stage again, to get that thrill and excitement from performing for a live audience. He returned to the bright lights of Broadway in 1953 to perform in the production of John Brown's Body, which would go on tour for a year. Tyrone and Linda welcomed their second daughter, Taryn, later that same year. But Linda didn't support her husband's transition back onto the stage. She wanted him home more, and working in movies could keep him home more. The distance and differences in opinion ultimately took its toll on the marriage. Tyrone Power and Linda Christian separated a year after the birth of their second child, but their divorce wasn't final until 1956. Continuing with his stage work, Tyrone Power reunited with the woman who had mentored him as a young, struggling actor, Katharine Cornell. The two worked professionally once more again, The young, inexperienced actor she coached over 2 decades earlier, now one of the most famous actors in the world. It was a wonderful full circle moment. While still keeping his feet on the stage, Tyrone Power also returned to the screen and was just as successful as ever. He even formed his own film company in 1957. It was important to him, though, to not sacrifice his career desires, and the stage made him happy and fulfilled. Tyrone was still enlisted in the military all this time as well. He had remained in the U.S. Marine Corps Reserves, and he was promoted to Major on October 4th, 1957. Now that he was in his 40s, he was finally able to get roles for his actual acting ability, not just his pretty face. His face was still plenty pretty, but he had aged out of those leading man matinee idol type roles. He had his chance to really prove his artistic abilities in the 1958 film adaptation of Agatha Christie's Witness for the Prosecution. In May of 1958, 44-year-old Tyrone Power said "I do" to Love Again when he married his third wife, 26-year-old Debbie Menardo. And Debbie promised him a son. And she was pregnant just a few months into their marriage. Tyrone loved his daughters with all his heart, but it was very important to him that the Power dynasty live on through a male heir. A male heir that could follow in the footsteps of his father, grandfather, great-grandfather, and great-great-grandfather. Tyrone Power wanted that son so badly. And a son he got. But he never got to meet him. In the fall of 1958, Ty's production company was making the film Solomon and Sheba in Spain, and the work of producing and starring in this high-intensity film was physically and mentally straining. During one particularly grueling day of shooting, Tyrone collapsed on set. He was rushed to the hospital, but it was too late. In almost an instant, just as it happened with his father almost 3 decades earlier, Tyrone Power died of a massive heart attack on November 15, 1958. He was only 44 years old. Shortly before his passing, Ty had had a physical with his physician. His doctor advised for a second cardiogram, seeing some irregularities in his heart health. Tyrone declined. He told his doctor, "If there is something wrong, I don't want to know." Just a few months before he died, Tyrone Power had filmed a public service announcement for the American Heart Association, a tribute to his father who had died in his arms of a heart attack. In the piece, he said, quote, "For all of us, the most precious element we have is time. But time runs out too soon for millions because of a health enemy that takes more lives than all other diseases combined, heart disease," end quote. He had no idea just how precious time really was. Longtime friend Cesar Romero delivered the eulogy at Tyrone's funeral. He said of his great friend, quote, "He was a beautiful man, beautiful on the outside and beautiful on the inside," end quote. On January 22, 1959, just 2 months after his death, in maybe a cruel or beautiful twist of fate, depending on how you look at it, Tyrone Power received the son he had always wanted. The son that he wanted to walk in his footsteps and all of the footsteps before him. The son he would never meet. Tyrone Power IV. Less than a year after the death of her only son, Tyrone's mother Paisha died on September 29, 1959, in the arms of her only surviving child, her daughter Anne. She died having lived briefly through what no parent ever wants to live through, the death of a child. Now I would like to share some other interesting facts I learned about the great Tyrone Power during my research. Bullet point number 1. Tyrone Power's son did follow in all of the footsteps before him and became an actor. He didn't make it big like his father, but he had roles in some pretty big movies like Cocoon. According to IMDB, he was still making movies as recent as 2019. Bullet point number 2. Tyrone Power was pretty closely related to the great Laurence Olivier. Tyrone's paternal great-grandmother was Olivier's grandmother. Her name was Anne Gilbert, and she was a well-known actress. Bullet point number 3. Loretta Young was supposed to play the leading female role in Tyrone Power's breakout film, Lloyds of London, but she stormed out when she discovered the studio diminished her role substantially so they could showcase Tyrone in order to introduce him to audiences in a bold way. Madeline Carroll played the part instead. Young got over it, and she and Tyrone worked very well together in future films and became good friends. Bullet point number 4. Tyrone was known for his practical jokes on the sets of his movies. Everyone loved working with him. Bullet point number 5. Tyrone saved every script from every single movie he worked on, and he had them bound as a keepsake. He was very proud of all of his work. Bullet point number 6. Did you think I could make it through an entire episode without mentioning Gone with the Wind? Not a chance. According to IMDB, Tyrone Power was considered for the role of Ashley Wilkes in Gone with the Wind. That would have been a great love triangle, Tyrone Power, Vivien Leigh, and Olivia de Havilland. In conclusion, Tyrone Power was more than just a handsome face. He was absolutely beloved by everyone around him. He had a fun, kind, down-to-earth, funny personality that made everyone around him want to stay around him. He had big shoes to fill, and he was going to do everything he could to fill those shoes. He didn't want to settle for romantic lead after romantic lead. He wanted to challenge himself. He was in the business for more than the fame and the big paycheck. Tyrone Power was on his way to showcasing his talents in a new light during the next chapter of his career. He was excited to show the world what he had in him, what he could share with them. But his chance was tragically cut short, so the world would never know. Thank you, Tyrone Power, for gracing the screens of millions with your incredible talent. Your friend Cesar Romero was right. You were beautiful, both inside and out. And thank you all for listening. Please follow the show where you listen to your podcasts. It really helps. Leaving a 5-star review helps a ton too, and a positive rating on Apple Podcasts if you enjoy the show. Also, I do have a huge list of future episode subjects, but if you have a star from the Golden Age that you would like me to cover, shoot me an email at goldenagestars@gmail.com or message me on the show page on Instagram or Facebook, and I'll get your request done sooner than later. And thank you again to Screen Name Movie Degree for this suggestion. I really enjoyed researching Tyrone Power. You guys are all the best. For this episode, I used a Biography Channel documentary titled The Last Idol, Tyrone Power Biography. I also used a book titled Tyrone Power, The Life and Legacy of One of Hollywood's Most Famous Swashbucklers by the Charles Rivers editors. Also, Tyrone-Power.com, which was full of very extensive information, so thank you to them. Encyclopedia.com and The Love of My Life, IMDB.